Dive deep into the life of Elliott Smith, the Nebraska-born, Texas-raised, Portland-forged singer-songwriter who transformed whispered confessions into anthems for the disenchanted. This video traces his journey from a quiet boy practicing chipped ivory chords in his grandparents' den to the Oscar-nominated artist whose delicate melodies outshone 90s grunge roar. We'll follow him through Heatmiser's feedback-drenched clubs, the intimate four-track magic of Roman Candle, the orchestral sweep of EXO, and the haunting legacy of From a Basement on the Hill. Along the way, you'll uncover the childhood fractures that shaped his lyricism, the academic detours that sharpened his mind, the industry pressures that magnified his stage fright, and the mysterious final day that still fuels debate. Whether you're a lifelong fan or new to his catalog, this cinematic biography unpacks the genius, the struggles, and the enduring resonance of songs that prove vulnerability can be louder than any amplifier. Hit play to meet the man behind the myth and hear why his echo still vibrates in every indie folk falsetto today. Stephen Paul Smith was born at 3:13 a.m. on August 6, 1969, in an Omaha hospital whose fluorescent corridors smelled of floor wax and newborn warmth. Nurses noted 10 fingers, 10 toes, a tuft of dark hair, and a heartbeat that fluttered unusually fast before settling into a steady tick, hardly noteworthy except for the way his mother, Bunny K. Berryman, later swore she could still hear that rhythm in the doorframes of every home they occupied. 6 months later, an ordinary morning argument between Bunny and her husband, Gary Smith, calcified into the decision to divorce. Omaha snow hid the moving van's tire tracks, but the rupture left a trench across the infant's timeline. Father in Portland for med school residency, mother and son boarding a southbound Greyhound to Duncanville, Texas, where Bunny's parents offered a spare bedroom and a promise that things would stabilize in time. Stability, however, proved a slippery proposition. Duncanville in the early 70s was an expanding suburb, tract houses, freshly poured sidewalks, churches whose parking lots filled twice on Sundays and once on Wednesday night. In one of those modest post-war homes, Stephen's earliest memories fused heat-haze horizons with the click of ceiling fans and the muffled quarrels adults conducted in half-closed rooms. The boy developed the quiet child's radar, reading atmospheres the way older kids read comics. When Bunny remarried in 1973 to Charlie Welch, an ex-Marine with a salesman's grin and a drill sergeant's sense of order, Stephen absorbed the change without protest, but internally he began mapping exit routes, backyards where magnolia branches leaned low enough to climb, irrigation ditches that hid late afternoon daydreams. The tool shed loft whose plywood floor became the stage for first-ever imaginary concerts performed for barn cats and crickets. By 9, he discovered a more portable refuge, an aging spinet piano in his grandparents' den, abandoned after an uncle's aborted lessons. The ivory on middle C chipped like a tooth, and the sustain pedal squeaked. But the moment Stephen struck a triad, the room's oxygen rearranged itself. Nobody in the family played well enough to guide him, so he invented his own curriculum, memorizing commercial jingles, then rag-like patterns heard on Saturday morning cartoons. His grandfather, a retired railroad clerk, showed him how to fold calloused fingers into a basic F major shape. Stephen responded by playing it until the household begged for silence and just as quickly missed the hush when he stopped. Christmas of 1979 delivered a battered Yamaha acoustic that smelled of attic dust and linseed oil. It arrived with rusty strings, a warped neck, and a promise from Bunny that new hobbies might keep Stephen occupied now that Little League didn't stick. The guitar spoke a different dialect than the piano. It required fingertip pain tolerance. endurance on buzzing chords, an acceptance of imperfection. Stephen loved it instantly, taking the instrument to school for show and tell, though shyness prevented him from demonstrating beyond a timid G chord. Alone, he practiced until blisters peeled, holding the body flush against his chest as though proximity alone might accelerate proficiency. School corridors echoed with gossip about Boy Scouts, basketball tryouts, and the Dallas Cowboys' fortune. Stephen floated through, a polite ghost clutching mixtapes compiled from late-night FM stations. Teachers labeled him gifted after state test scores blasted past percentiles. Counselors urged advanced math, debate club, anything productive. But Stephen's internal metronome ticked different measures. Lunchtime saw him hunched over spiral notebooks, scribbling lyric fragments. A broken streetlight hum, the smell of chlorine on summer skin, the metaphysics of goodbyes no kid should have to understand. He played these drafts against guitar progressions each night, discovering how vowel shapes resonated longer on open strings, how plosives died too quickly unless softened. The songs were embryonic, but they were songs, and they felt more authentic than Pledge of Allegiance recitations or textbook definitions of civics. When puberty arrived with acne and awkward height spurts, Stephen tasted rebellion in the mild form of clandestine cherry wine and 2 drag cigarettes behind the 7-Eleven. He wasn't addicted yet the way other classmates were addicted to engine grease or homecoming hierarchies. He simply wanted to test how far the self could be stretched before snapping. One night he downed half a Budweiser stolen from Charlie's fridge and discovered the world grew pleasantly out of focus, but so did chord shapes, rendering practice useless. He resolved to keep experiments moderate. Discipline mattered more than euphoria. Letters from Gary in Portland arrived monthly, brief, apologetic, opening with weather reports, rain broke a record this week, and ending with promises to visit. Stephen traced raindrop gray loops in his father's handwriting and wondered what it would feel like to live where water fell from the sky more than sunlight. In summer 1983, Gary transformed promise into plane ticket, a one-way invitation to spend freshman year of high school in Oregon. Bunny, now juggling work shifts and step-family negotiations, agreed, hoping distance might give Stephen breathing room, and privately, fearing he would inherit Charlie's temper if he stayed. The move was seismic. Portland's air smelled of cedar, espresso, and the rotting sweet aroma of perpetual drizzle. Lincoln High School loomed downtown like a brick citadel, diverse in ways Duncanville wasn't. Punks with safety pin ear cuffs, skateboarders painting lockers with Thrasher stickers, theater kids projecting Shakespeare in hallways. Stephen stepped through the front doors, clutching a class schedule and an acoustic in a thrift store case plastered with Pixies decals. By lunchtime, he had located the silent corner of the cafeteria favored by music nerds. By October, he was jamming in a friend's garage, coaxing fuzzy lead lines from a borrowed distortion pedal while rain hammered the aluminum roof. Academically, he excelled without visible effort. Teachers praised essays linking Hemingway to existential coping mechanisms, algebra quizzes solved in half the allotted time, Latin translations that read like newly minted poems. In guidance counselor meetings, Stephen confessed no desire for Ivy League or MIT. He wanted to write songs, maybe score films, maybe teach, something with enough freedom to breathe. The counselor advised journaling realistic options, and Stephen dutifully listed them: sound engineer, studio intern, guitar tech, then went home and filled additional pages with alternate tunings instead. Sophomore year introduced 2 catalytic events. First, on a rainy October evening, Stephen attended his inaugural all-ages show at Satyricon, a downtown club marinated in stale beer and cigarette ash. Headliner: a scrappy trio whose frontman yowled over minor key riffs. The visceral propulsion of live drums pummeling the sternum rewired something in Stephen's neurochemistry. Second, he encountered Monteverdi's madrigals in music theory class, discovering that 17th century polyphony sounded in its own way as subversive as the mosh pits of Satyricon. He mashed these influences together that winter, experimenting with vocal doubling on a 4-track borrowed from a senior headed to ski vacation. Alone in Gary's apartment, he layered whispered harmonies over nylon string arpeggios, testing how close confessional lyrics could sit to ear canals without collapsing into self-pity. At 17, he began signing essays Elliott rather than Stephen. Explanations varied. It honored Portland's Elliott Avenue. It differentiated him from Steve Smith, the Dallas Mavericks player. It simply felt like a name a songwriter might wear. Gary shrugged and adapted. Teachers followed suit. The rebranding, subtle yet profound, allowed Elliott to partition off the Texas years like a journal finished and shelved. Graduation, spring of 1987, arrived with National Merit Scholar citations and a choice: scholarship offers from state universities or an adventure at a Hampshire college, Amherst, Massachusetts, renowned for student-designed majors and a campus radio station itching for fresh blood. Amherst won. Elliott boarded yet another cross-country flight, guitar case, cassette demos, Kierkegaard anthology packed next to flannel shirts. Hampshire eschewed traditional grades in favor of written evaluations. The system suited him. He could chase interdisciplinary rabbits without fear of GPA collapse. Morning philosophy seminars dissected Kierkegaard's either-or, afternoons explored political science critiques of Reaganomics, evenings collapsed into dorm lounge debates fueled by diner coffee and secondhand smoke. One such lounge introduced him to Neil Gust, a wiry film student obsessed with Dinosaur Jr. and Velvet Underground bootlegs. They discovered mutual affection for off-kilter chord voicings and rhythmic odd meters. By sophomore spring, they christened themselves Heatmiser after the stop-motion Christmas special character, half joke, half apocalypse. Drummer Tony Lash and bassist Brant Peterson materialized via campus flyers reading, "Think Husker Du meets XTC. Call if interested." Rehearsals commandeered a forgotten maintenance shed, amps stacked against cinderblock walls, extension cords threading like vines. Elliott balanced class readings with weekend gigs at Northampton basements, where the audience of 15 felt colossal. Songs stomped between punk aggression and introspective bridges. Elliott's lyrics remained personal, but volume and distortion camouflaged fragility. Yelling a diary entry over power chords felt safer than whispering it. In private, though, he continued home recording acoustic sketches, lullabies built from shame, longing, and the particular ache of 3 a.m. fluorescent lights, pieces he rarely played for the band. Senior year's divisional thesis required a comprehensive project. Elliott combined political science coursework on state surveillance with a composition portfolio exploring the concept of hidden microphones, paranoia, as both sociological phenomenon and creative device. Professors labeled it ambitious, occasionally impenetrable, singular. Commencement, May 1991, handed him a degree, but Hampshire left a deeper imprint. Validation that intellect and emotion were not opposing camps, that art could question power structures while still hitting a chorus hook. Returning to Portland post-graduation felt cyclical, like a vinyl side restarting, same rain-glossed streets, but now with bandmates and gigs waiting. Heatmiser dove into recording Dead Air in 1992 at a warehouse studio where dead rats sometimes floated in the toilet tank. The album's serrated guitars and shouted refrains earned regional momentum. Cop and Speeder followed in 1994, refining snarl into shape. Money remained microscopic, gas station burritos for dinner, couch surfing on tour, but press blurbs compared them to early Pixies, and local radio spun Stray during graveyard shifts. Elliott enjoyed camaraderie, yet felt a widening rift. He was writing delicate songs no full stack Marshall could host comfortably. That dissonance birthed Roman Candle. Over winter 1993-94, house sitting for a friend, Elliott strung microphones through the living room, recording to 4-track with zero isolation between voice and creaking floorboards. 9 songs emerged, each underlain by the hum of passing cars, each lyric a confession delivered in conspiratorial hush. The cassette reached Cavity Search Records thanks to then-girlfriend J.J. Gonson's encouragement. Elliott imagined a limited pressing for local fans. Instead, critics seized on its bravery, an atlas of emotional bruises traced with forensic detail. The surprise acclaim emboldened him to present the material to Heatmiser, who reacted with everything from pride to bewilderment. The band soldiered on, but the center of gravity shifted. Kill Rock Stars, Olympia's bastion of indie authenticity, offered to release Elliott's next solo endeavor. 1995's self-titled album expanded Roman Candle's palette. Finger-picked guitar lines wove through muted percussion. Vocals doubled until fabric soft, delicate. Needle in the Hay ricocheted through college radio, later soundtracking Wes Anderson's The Royal Tenenbaums with an attempted suicide scene, so on the nose Elliott reportedly winced upon viewing. Still, the momentum gathered. Meanwhile, Heatmiser secured a 2-record deal with Virgin, a tantalizing carrot that arrived too late. Tensions flared in practice rooms. Decisions about set lists felt like debates over artistic custody. The recording of Mix City Sons in 1996 was meant to be the breakthrough, but resignation soaked the sessions. The album, melodically strong, lyrically keener, landed posthumously months after the band dissolved, its bittersweet quality echoing what could have been. Elliott poured the freed energy into either or. Working in Portland lofts and friends' basements, he played most instruments himself, mixing on equipment sometimes held together by duct tape. The album navigated waltz signatures, pop-punk tempos, and existential dread. Critics praised its tension between barroom warmth and philosophical chill. Sales climbed modestly, yet insiders like director Gus Van Sant sniffed paradigm shift. Van Sant phoned one rainy afternoon, requesting songs for a script called Good Will Hunting. Elliott mailed a DAT tape containing Between the Bars, No Name Number 3, Say Yes, and a new sketch he called Miss Misery. So new, he'd never performed it live. Hollywood test screenings reported audiences lingering through credits just to identify the songwriter. January 1998, Elliott found himself in Los Angeles hotels meeting executives who addressed him via assistants. The Academy Award nomination for Miss Misery jettisoned him from indie cult to mainstream curiosity. Press junkets fixated on his thrift store suits and mumbling humility. Contract proposals stacked like overdue library books. DreamWorks, launching a boutique label spearheaded by ex-Warner execs, promised creative freedom plus resources commensurate with your vision. Elliott, overwhelmed, signed on the same afternoon. Heatmiser's dissolution was finalized in legal print, a symbolic baton pass. Recording XO became his first encounter with 96 channel consoles, string section budgets, and catering trays stocked with artisan hummus. Producers Rob Schnapp and Tom Rothrock respected his demo skeletons, adding organs, mellotron flutes, and cyclical piano motifs. Elliott recorded background vocals so meticulously he sometimes sang a single word 50 times to nail micro-intonation. Between takes, he nursed Evan Williams bourbon from a coffee mug, Excusing Nerves. The album dropped August 25, 1998, debuting at number 37 on Billboard, astronomical compared with indie numbers. Reviewers marveled at the leap, intimate songwriting wrapped in Beatlesque orchestration, without sacrificing vulnerability. Yet commercial validation intensified stage fright. Tours found him oscillating between charisma and withdrawal, some sets transcendent, others truncated when anxiety upended him mid-song. Fans forgave, critics speculated. Elliott retreated deeper into hotel solitude with minibar miniatures and prescription tranquilizers. Off-tour months produced demos for what became Figure 8. Sessions toggled between Sunset Sound and London's Abbey Road, a pilgrimage culminating in late-night walks across the zebra crossing, immortalized by the Beatles. The studio staff swore they heard him strum fragments of Because between takes, as though communing with ghosts. Figure 8, released April 18, 2000, dazzled reviewers with Baroque pop sheen, but sold less than XO, a fact the label disguised with talk of long tail growth. Elliott responded by extending the tour circuit, Australia, Japan, Europe, driving himself to exhaustion. Amphetamine-laced vitamins helped him stay alert. Opiates countered the pulse. Benzodiazepines floored the anxiety. Friends noticed jaw tension, rail-thin limbs, talk of a surveillance van outside venues, white, always white. By spring 2001, John Bryan, a friend and admired producer, invited Elliott to Ocean Way Studios for exploratory sessions. Some days produced lush epics, complex chord changes beneath stacked harmonies, rivaling pet sounds, while others dissolved when Elliott accused equipment of broadcasting private takes to the label's head office. The cycle of creation and destruction frustrated everyone. Eventually, Bryan backed out, citing logistical and health concerns. Elliott relocated to a friend's 2-story house in Echo Park, turning living room walls into acoustic panel collages of blankets and egg cartons. Engineer-producer David McConnell remembers 90-degree summers with blackout curtains drawn, sessions starting at 11 p.m., meth pipe smoke curling around Telecaster headstocks. Despite grime, brilliance emerged. Songs like King's Crossing, whose chorus lyric, if it gets real, just turn the record over, felt like auto instructions for survival. Live performances during this era veered tragic. Audiences reported him staring at ceiling rafters mid-song, forgetting verses, apologizing profusely. A fateful night in November 2002, he and Jennifer Chiba attempted entry to a Flaming Lips benefit. A scuffle with LAPD security unfolded, leaving Elliott bruised, arrested, depressed. The headlines amplified shame. Weeks later, he enrolled in the Neurotransmitter Restoration Center, where intravenous amino acid therapy purportedly rewired dopamine pathways. He emerged pale but coherent, texting friends about sugar cravings and new sobriety. January and February 2003 revealed hints of renaissance. He played unannounced sets at Silver Lake, Spaceland, and Largo, acoustic, cigarette smoke swirling like stage fog. He joked about taking requests as long as they're in G minor, then delivered 20-song marathons, mixing classics with nascent material. Let's Get Lost, Strung Out Again, Oh So Slowly. Fans wept at clarity in his timbre, as though witnessing an eclipse in reverse. To celebrate turning 34, he hosted a sober barbecue, root beer kegs, tofu dogs, an MP3 playlist heavy on the Kinks. Friends dared to hope. Work on From a Basement on the Hill accelerated. Elliott recorded to iMac using Logic, layering field samples of neighborhood dogs and freeway drones beneath finger-picked progressions. He toyed with dissonant piano clusters, processed through ring modulators, aiming to make chaos beautiful enough to sleep inside. He told confidants the double album would chronicle descent, purge, and rebirth. That side 4 might close with a found sound collage of children laughing and car alarms, a thesis that life is symphonic even when disharmonious. On the surface, Tuesday morning, 21st October 2003, looked ordinary. Elliott strolled from Massa Bakery with a coffee, circled Echo Park Lake under a colorless sky, and phoned archivist Larry Crane to chat about transferring a stack of multi-track tapes. After lunch, tension with Jennifer Chiba flared. She says it began with clutter, then slid into old jealousy about a studio engineer. Voices rose. Elliott threatened to storm out to a meeting no one had scheduled. Jennifer stepped into the bathroom to let the air cool. What happened next dissolves into shadows. A scream, hurried footsteps. Elliott pitching forward against the refrigerator, both hands wrapped around a kitchen knife taken from the dish rack. Chiba pulled the blade, called 911, and tried chest compressions until paramedics arrived. At Cedars-Sinai, surgeons found 2 stab wounds, one piercing the heart. Even an emergency thoracotomy couldn't reverse the clock. The coroner's report, released that December, named stab wounds to the chest as the cause of death, but left the manner undetermined. Toxicology showed only prescribed levels of antidepressants and ADHD medication, and the absence of typical hesitation cuts spawned theories ranging from homicide to psychotic break. Lacking conclusive evidence, the LAPD left the file open, an ambiguity that hardened into a permanent ache for fans who needed facts but were offered only conjecture. In the weeks that followed, producer Rob Schnapf and bassist friend Joanna Bohm gathered Elliott's scattered drives, ADATs, and DAT reels, wrestling with whether to honor each rough mix or add final polish. 27 songs emerged as From a Basement on the Hill, issued on 19th October 2004 by ANTI Records. The collection thrummed with jagged distortion one moment and hushed lullaby the next. King's Crossing spliced apocalyptic visions with a plea for mercy. Twilight drifted on brushed drums like a whispered farewell, and a distorted reality is now a necessity to be free. Closed the record as both accusation and absolution. Critics hailed it unanimously. Listeners received it as a last letter, postmarked from the brink. Elliott Smith's final day and the album that followed remain inseparable, 2 movements in the same unresolved symphony. The unanswered questions surrounding his death have invited speculation, but the music he left behind keeps offering something sturdier than conjecture: candor, melody, and the fragile courage to place a trembling truth in plain sight. Every spin of From a Basement on the Hill reminds us that an artist's light can survive the murk that swallowed him. Every whispered harmony extends the conversation he could not finish. And so the story, though punctuated by a brutal silence, continues, replayed on turntables, echoed in bedroom covers, carried forward by anyone who hears in those songs the possibility of turning pain into something that refuses to die.